1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. But thou, O man of God, flee these things, and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. Fight the good fight of faith. Lay hold on eternal life, whereunto thou art also called, and hast professed a good profession before many witnesses. Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is your brother Hawayala. I want to give all glory and praises to our Heavenly Father Yahweh, and we do so in the name of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi. Grace and mercy be abound to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth that are doing the work in truth and sincerity and are waiting on the second coming of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi HaMashiach. Today we're going into a brief history on money and basically going into the evil system that is controlled by the elites of Edom. As we know that there is a recession going on. It hasn't been fully announced to the masses, but there's all signs and indication if you've been following our channel and you've been following different media sources that are alternative sources in regards to the financial system and what's going on, that we are currently going to be experiencing some economic downturn, and we don't know exactly how bad it's going to get, but it can get very, very bad. And for a reason being is that this allows for a maximum amount of control over the wealth of the earth and over the people. So what we have to understand is we need to go into how things were set up. Now, this is a brief history and overview. I have some articles, some information from Wikipedia, which are just general sources. And also at the end, there's going to be a video, which I highly recommend all of y'all watch. So that way you can see a financial expert who's actually been studying this for the better part of 40 to 50 years in terms of the history of money, the current monetary system, the currency system, and exactly how the elites use these things to actually enslave the masses, okay? Now, we know that based on biblical prophecy and based off of the things that we can see today, that the main people who are victims of this enslavement are the children of Israel, okay? And this is how the system actually came about. Many of these things that we are going to read up on were produced and based off of the initial enslavement and of the northern and southern kingdom. Okay, that is the whole thing about it. As I've done, more and more research, is that these systems that are in place that, I'm going to talk about briefly, and then y'all can do a deeper dive into when they started and how it was implemented. But what you're going to realize that the fall of the nation of Israel is actually the way that they began to bring in the system that they have in place now, and it's just evolved over time. And that was one of the things that was shocking, because a lot of people that talk about the evil of like these different governing bodies, whether it's the Federal Reserve Bank or the U.S. Treasury or the IMF or the World Bank or the central banking systems, they do not tell you about the origin of these systems and how they came about. And when you go back and you do a dive into history and you look into those things, you're going to realize that the origin of these systems came about due to the enslavement and the fall of the children of Israel. Okay? And this is not, so I'm not saying this in hyperbole. This is literally, when I do the research and I look at the time frame in which many of these things were brought out, you're going to see a correlation with the fall of our people with the rise of this system. Okay? And so we're going to read that again in verse 10 of 1 Timothy. For the love of money is the root of all evil. Okay? And, it's crazy because I'll see people say money is the root of all evil. I even seen a comment that was made, I believe by Akon, concerning how he felt like he was happier when he was poor versus when he's rich because of the issues that he deals with having access to what? To money. Okay, he talked about covetous and envy and how people change on people when money is at play. Okay, another thing is, I remember even seeing in the comment, of this particular post that came from a TMZ, I guess, interview after he had made this comment. But in the post, I saw the same thing written by the rapper The Game. However, he misquoted it, and this is I don't understand how people are misquoting this particular part of the scriptures. They keep on using money is the root of all evil. No, it's the love of money is the root of all evil. Okay, there's a very big difference. Okay, because we have to understand what is the driving force behind this system. Okay, and what it is basically with the holding of riches and wealth is what is driving the elites to do this, because they want to ensure that they have and you do not. Okay, and that's the reason why you have that famous quote from Klaus Schwab, which says, "You will own nothing and be happy." Okay, so who's going to own everything? They will. And they're going to create a system where they're going to make you believe that you're going to be happy without holding on to what? This money, this wealth. And that's why we have to go into this. Now, what I'm going to show you is we're going to go into the blue letter for this word, okay, for the love of money, because it is a compound word. Okay, we'll go ahead and play it. This is Strong's G 5365.
Strong's G 5365. Philargoria. Philargoria.
Philargoria. Okay, that word there for philargoria, you see the root word phil, which means, or phila or philo. You know that goes back to being fond of. Okay, and this is basically a desire. Okay. Towards a particular person, place, or thing, which this right here is dealing with money. Okay, now it says for the love of money, and then when you look at the word agoria, okay, you're going to see the word avarice. Okay, now we're going to go into the actual etymology for that word. So that word there, of course, is a noun because it's a thing. It says in the Century 300, inordinate desire of gaining and possessing wealth. Okay, so this is dealing with the inordinate desire of gaining wealth. Okay, the love of gaining of wealth is the root of all evil. It says here, the fifth of the 7 deadly sins, from the old French, avarice, greed, or covetousness. That's why when you go in here, if you notice, and for some of you brothers and sisters that have understood some of the things that we talked about in regards to the English language and just literature in general and how to read your Bible, dealing with isocolons, as you see here, there's a colon. There's a colon right here. The love of money is the root of all evil. Then colon, equal, meaning it's going to break it down on the other end, okay, which while some coveted after, okay, because they coveted after this wealth, okay, and we're going to get into, money and what it really means and the history behind that. And this is part of the reason why I'm doing this, because there was a lot of longer ways to go into the history of money, but I believe this is going to be one of the shorter ways to go into it because I found a pretty good article on this. Now, like we said there, going back into that word in the etymology, okay, is the greed and covetous of what? Gaining and possessing wealth. And then it says greed, inordinate desire. This is where the word inordinate affection goes into play. Okay, inordinate desire is something that is abnormal desire towards something, okay, which can lead to problems, okay. This is part of what covetous is. Covetous and greed is inordinate desire that is not righteous, okay. It's not something like you're seeking after spiritual things, right? You're seeking after carnal things, and this is becoming an inordinate out of range, because now it's leading to greed or covetous energy towards this particular thing, right? Now it says here, greedy, grasping, crave, long for, be eager, okay? So we have to understand, why is this being, said? Because of what we're going to talk about and what the elites run on. See, a lot of people don't understand that power is something on earth that allows people to gain material possessions and riches, things. we have to understand exactly what this is and get into the mindset of what the reason why the elites of Edom, they're in and out, they're bankers, okay? We've talked about it in previous lessons. If you watch some of the past lessons on the MOTV, you're going to see different breakdowns to get the understanding of, what's going on. Now, by understanding this, you're going to have a better indication and idea as to how and why they're setting up this system that they're doing, okay? Which is their New World Order, okay, under their digital currency system, okay? And it's going to kind of make more sense as time moves on, okay? Some of the things that they're going to do, some of the crises that they will bring in is all about this, okay? Now, this article is from currencytransfer.com, and the article was written on February 10th of 2023, and it says here, currency versus money, what is the difference? Okay, so what I like about this is going to go over, some history. We'll go ahead and start up at the top. It says the words currency and money are often used in the same sentence and clouded together, but there is an important distinction to make between them. And one of the reasons why I looked into this is because of the comment made by one of the finance guys that I follow, which you'll see the video at the end. I actually had to clip out some of it was actually almost an hour long, the conversation that he had with Gregory Gammon, who also runs a channel known as The Rebel Capitalist, which I know some of you brothers are actually following. But this was a very, good interview. It happened last week. I was listening to it at work, and some of the things that he said really hit home on what we read in the scriptures. And a lot of what he is saying, when you watch this video, like, some of y'all are going to probably be blown away by some of the sound bites that you'll hear from it, but it proves exactly what we've been saying about the people that rule this world, that they are evil, okay? And he understands this in full totality, but there's certain things he's not going to understand because, again, he's not plugged into the scriptures. He doesn't have the understanding through belief in Yahawashi, so he's going to fall short, but he gives a lot of insight to give you information of how to close that information that that you want to build upon. Remember, be ye not ignorant of any matter, whether great or small. You don't need to be an overall expert in the financial system, but if you can understand certain key nuances, and you can understand certain principal things that makes this system run and what the objective of the system is, now you're able to see the end game even more clearer. Okay, so now it says here, in its simplest explanation, currency is a type of money. Currency takes the form of paper and coins, but money can be anything that is standardized and accepted as a form of payment. And one of the things that he said is that you have to be able to separate money versus currency. Money has a stored value, okay? Currency is something that's used in circulation. Now, what we know as currency, okay, remember the word currency, you think about it, currency is something that flows. It's constantly moving, okay? That means it's in circulation, okay? Think about a current, okay? A current carries something to another place. It's just like you catch a current out in the ocean, it's going to take you somewhere. So it's a constantly moving thing. It doesn't stop. It's in circulation, right? Because it's the form in which it's an instrument that's used within an economic setting. In this case, paper and coins. In addition to that, there's also the digital aspect, okay? That's why there's something called the digital currency. What? The CBDC, the central bank digital currency. Remember, the central bank digital currency is not money as what money is historically. It is an instrument of control. That's what the currency is, okay? And that's how you're going to see how the system unravels. Now, let's go into this. Now, we're going to go here. It's the history, okay, of money. In times gone by, people would trade goods like food, materials, and livestock directly with another. In smaller ecosystems and civilizations, this was sufficient. Now, I'm going to give you an example. One of the things that you have to understand is go back into the Old Testament. This is the beauty of reading the Old Testament, because you can see these things playing out. We're growing up in a time where our people have no idea. They view money as the paper that's in their pocket or what's on their cash app or in their bank account. They have a hard time understanding past systems in order to understand where things are going. You got to understand where we've been. And this is going to give you an idea of how deceptive this current system is. Okay. So it's why when you read about, for example, Jacob labored, okay, under Laban, and he was promised certain things. Okay. You can also, in addition to food, materials, and livestock, you can also receive people, okay, as a form of this system, okay? Because these are all things that produce, that hold wealth, that produce things that can also be bartered as well, okay? Now, when you look at this thing, it says there was a barter system and people would trade as well as they could to get the most profit and or value. When you go into the history back then, certain things like that were very valuable, for example, let's say purple garments, right? Because purple garments were hard to come by because of how they were produced, okay? The colors of like red or purple garments was like a big deal in the ancient world, where if someone had a purple garment, they can literally get like, you know, things out of it. They can get food, they can get gold out of it, they can barter in a system where they say, hey, I'll give you this purple garment for that lamb, okay? So there was a way for people to barter without using what we call cash, okay, today. So people had a barter system back then. And then it eventually evolved into something else, which we'll get into, okay? So, however, this did have a few drawbacks, as it meant that trading was limited to the trader, was therefore quite inefficient. Goods are not always compatible either. For example, if someone wanted to trade wheat for cows, the exchange rate was not exactly clear, as both of these goods have different values for different people. Now, I'll give you an example. Like, if you live in a certain type of climate, there are certain things that you don't care to have, right? So if somebody lived in a tropical climate and it was year-round tropical, there's no reason for that person to go and buy a particular type of coat. For example, like let's say a North Face jacket. You're not buying a North Face jacket living in Phoenix, okay? That's why you see certain items in society. They're in certain places. They're not in sufficient number in certain parts of the country because of the value that it has there is different than in another place, right? So this is one of the reasons why we have to understand that this is why this particular system is not always as efficient, depending on where one is at and who they're dealing with, okay? So this is where commodity money will come into play. So now we're going to go ahead and get into this. Okay, remember, the original one was a bartering system, bartering things, okay? Then you have a commodity, okay, money. So it says, as society progressed, people began to use commodities to trade, which meant trading as before, but using an abundant but valuable material to trade with. Using a commodity good was a remedy to the inefficiency, and early uses included skins and corn. So for example, you got goat skins, okay? You got cowhide, right? You got different things. You got corn. You can use these as commodities to trade because these are things that could be valuable to that particular person, right? Now, commodity, we have examples of commodities. Of course, a major one, which we'll get into, is something that's known as, that's out there in the market. A lot of times the commodity that's very valuable is something that is used globally, okay? It's something that is needed on a global scale. This is what makes something a valuable commodity, which we'll get into, okay? So it says here that this was an ideal way to trade with all other goods and determine an agreed price. Commodity money was a stepping stone to money as we know it today, as it introduced the idea of universally understood value and a value that is applicable to all things. With the discovery of metals and the increase in technology allowing people to store and smelt it, precious metals became the perfect commodity. Gold and silver became the first steps into a store of value, which are still used today. And that's what the guy was talking about in the video, which you'll see in the end, okay? He talked about money being a store of value. Now, he looks at money from the standpoint of this. When you get into the commodity money, particularly gold and silver, which is something that historically was used, and this was also accepted everywhere in the known world, okay? So that's the reason why somebody can have a gold coin, and he could be coming from Persia, and he can take that same gold coin to, let's say, Greece, and it'll be accepted, okay? Because it had a same value universally in that time across the known world, right? Same thing with silver. Now, it says here that gold and silver became the first steps into a store of value, which are still used today. Due to the unreactive nature of gold, its rarity, and its attractive and distinct qualities, it fits perfectly as commodity money. Yeah, because gold always keeps its same value. It's can be always it doesn't deteriorate, so to speak. I mean, there's gold coins that have been around for thousands of years, and all you would need to do is just remove its impurities and bring it back to its luster, okay, its attractive and distinct quality. Unlike certain other things, they can lose that over time, right? This is able to store its value over centuries, over thousands of years, okay? So that's why they can find old coins and they can bring it back to, they can melt it, they can take it, and they can take a bunch of old coins and they can, smelt it. They can repackage it, make gold bars out of it, make gold coins out of it, right? Because it has a distinct qualities that it keeps, okay? And it's a very rare thing. It's not something that's out there in abundance, okay? And this is one of the reasons why, because gold is limited, gold and silver is limited, and it's only can be produced at a certain rate, okay? And it's only found in certain parts of the planet. This limits what is known as the money supply, okay? This is a problem for the elites. The elites know that gold and silver limits their money supply and their ability to control things. Now, where is this going back into? Think about ancient Rome, okay? That's a whole nother story. However, if I find a proper video of somebody breaking it down, which I believe I did see somebody breaking it down over the last month or so very well, so you can get an idea of it, it's gonna make complete sense when you watch and learn some of these things, okay? So now, let's go ahead and go on into money as we know it today. While the problem may have been solved with using a commodity, carrying around huge amounts of commodity is a burden and also a risk. This is one of the reasons why it was hard to carry around gold and silver. You would need basically a way to hide it, to conceal it, essentially. Sometimes you would also need a guard, somebody that will guard it. This is one of the reasons why anywhere where there's a large quantity of gold, there is high level of security. Just look, for example, Fort Knox in Kentucky, okay? So anywhere where there's a large amount of gold being stored, there is a high level of security because it is a risk to carry it around, right? We know about the pirates and how they were going around the whole world, looking for what? Gold and silver, looking for a store of value, essentially looking for wealth. They were coveting after this, and they were doing things, right, that was sinful. They were stealing, they were killing people, okay? They were doing wicked things for this, okay? Some of them were even turning on one another over that stored value that is found in that commodity, right? So we know that there's a risk with it, okay, with having something like that. And there's one of the reasons why that they're going to use as a reason why it would make sense for them to take out the circulation of currency, okay, which is a form of money, but it's really fiat, which we'll get into as well. Now, it says here that precious metals are also heavy. So imagine carrying 1,000 gold coins and you're trying to go somewhere to a far country or just go to another city, how you could fall among thieves and be robbed, right? So it's tough to carry around a lot of this, right? So people began to offer receipts for storing their commodities, which they could carry with them in exchange when required. Now, this is where back in that time, let's say you were a rich man, or let's say you had a certain amount of money, but you didn't want to carry it. You would have a receipt saying that I have this amount of money stored at this particular city, and I'm going to give you this as proof of, you can take this receipt and you can go and actually get this gold or get this silver in hand. Okay, this is where the receipts came into play, because this allowed them to exchange large quantities of money without actually carrying it in hand through proof of receipt. Okay, now as we go on, it says goldsmiths would store gold for customers and issue them with receipts for this gold. Okay, so again, goldsmiths would store gold for customers and issue them with receipts of this gold. So they would go to this goldsmith and say, hey, listen, I got 1,000 gold coins. I'm giving you this. You're going to give me a receipt showing that I gave you this money. Okay, this is where money or currency, as we begin to know it, began. Now you can exchange this note, this actual receipt, as a form of a promise to pay. Okay, so now we're going to go into, it says the tradition of this exchange can still be found on the pound sterling paper note. Take a look at the writing on the front, which will say, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of this. Historically, one could have traded their banknote, or receipt, which is the receipt of gold, same thing that the goldsmiths have, for gold. So there was a time you could actually take that particular banknote and you can get a direct value of gold, okay? Or the sum of this amount in a commodity. But, which is the commodity referring to in this particular example is gold. Of course, you also have silver. But since the gold standard ended in 1931 in Britain, banknotes were solidified into fiat currency, which means they are no longer backed by a commodity. So now when the British took away the gold standard in 1931, it was no longer the pound sterling, because the pound sterling implies that you're going to get back sterling silver. It became a fiat. Okay, it was no longer backed by a gold or silver minted coin. All right. Now that didn't mean that they didn't have actual coins, because I believe that's what's called minted, right? And we'll get into that, because that's where you get into paper notes and minted coins. Okay, but it meant that you can no longer take a banknote and get direct value the way you could before. Now they can put certain things in circulation, which we'll talk about as well. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and go down further. And it says, do we still use commodities? So this is what I alluded to earlier about how commodities are being used today. Commodities are the backbone of an entire world economy. Think oil or coffee, or better yet, let's just think about oil. So now we know about something called we have the oil market, right? You have something called the petrodollar. The US dollar, which is a currency, it's an instrument of currency, is traded, okay, for oil. So they use the US dollar to get oil. This brings value to the currency. Hence the reason why the United States dollar, the US dollar, is the world's Federal Reserve currency. Again, it is the Federal Reserve currency, not the it's the reserve currency of the earth. Okay, it's the reserve currency. It is not the reserve commodity. It is the reserve currency. It is basically the instrument or currency by which nations around the earth purchase contracts for oil, which is considered a lifeblood of an economy. It provides energy. Okay, this is a very big thing. This is the reason why that was done. And maybe another time we'll get into it, or I'll refer to y'all maybe certain videos that y'all can watch to kind of go into the history of that. It will be alluded to as well, in probably other videos that I'll suggest, but as you know about, just look up the petrodollar, just Google it, you can find the history yourself. Now, as we go on, it says, while the world trades with currency most of the time, and in our day-to-day lives, we only use currency to get by. Behind the scenes, commodities are traded more than ever. Currency will fluctuate and often fade over time, even fail completely, which is the end game. All fiat currencies have an expiration date. All of them. If you look up any fiat currency system, they all had a decline and a fall where they no longer are around. Their intrinsic value leads to zero. It eventually gets going. It has an expiration date. And this is what a lot of people have to understand about why this new system will be brought in, because they're going to basically cause it to fail to bring in this digital system. Okay? Now it says, but as long as there is a need for a commodity, its value will never fade, and often only ever increases. And that's the truth. Okay? Because a commodity such as oil, as long as there's a need for it to sustain economies, to produce energy, is going to continue to have some value. Okay? Now it says the recent slump in the stock market showed that this still holds true, as many investors took refuge in commodities. So what happens is when company stocks begin to go down, the return on investment in those stocks is not as valuable as it would be if you just hide yourself in commodities. And commodities hold value as long as it's needed in the world on a global scale. And this is where it's a more safer place to invest in commodities rather than in stocks. Okay, stocks is a whole nother subject as well. But you can also look into what stocks is. A stock is essentially a share in a company. Okay, it's a fractional share in a company. Sometimes someone can own the majority. You can be a majority shareholder. Many times these are the founders and the executives of these companies. They'll have a larger share, okay, or stock within a company. So now we're going to go to what is currency. Currency is a numerical form of money which can be traded as notes, coins, and digital currency. Again, notes, coins, and digital currency. Now, what is it referring to as far as in the U.S.? We have something known as the Federal Reserve note. Don't believe me? Pull up your wallet, look at your money, and you're going to see it's going to say Federal Reserve note. That is referring to the paper. Coins. These are minted coins, like your quarters, like your dimes, like your nickels and pennies. Then you have the digital currency, which is the system they're trying to get to. Now, in order for them to fully implement their digital currency system, they need to get rid of notes and coins. Okay, ultimately, that's what would happen. Now, it says examples of currency are the British pound, the euro, and the dollar. Fiat currency has completely detached from the underlying commodities, and it has no use value. Again, fiat currency has no use value, i.e. currency cannot be used for anything but further exchange. Okay, in exchange of I owe you, you owe me. You will see the breakdown of that in the video at the end of the lesson. Okay, now it says this paper money has been so ingrained that it has come to define value itself, as fiat currencies have existed for most nations for generations. Now, one of the problems with this is that people look at it in a certain light, in a certain way. It's very interesting because the currency is valuable in regards to what we need to do to get things. Make no mistake about it. We are living in a monopoly board game, though, okay, to keep it real. So, but it's the instrument that's used in this current system in this world. And what's very interesting about this is when you look at the history of money, that the elites were able to convince the world, and under really the threat of violence and threat of war, to switch over to a fiat currency system. Now, this fiat currency system is managed through what is known as central banks. So all these countries are under this particular, fiat mindset, and it's very dangerous. And we're seeing the dangers of this as we move forward. It's gonna get very ugly. Okay. on this planet because of this particular, deceptive system. Now, let's go on. It says, however, in times of economic turmoil, it becomes very clear the arbitrary nature of currency, as markets can crash overnight for seemingly arbitrary reasons. Now, give you an example. You have the Great Depression. You have also the Weimar Republic. You have various currencies that failed under economic turmoil, and then they had to reinstitute something different. They had to start doing, it's crazy, like when you really look at how bad fiat currency is, because it's designed to basically crash and to cause chaos and confusion, which leads to a greater wealth transfer amongst those that control the system, because they don't lose at the end. Okay, the house wins. The elite house of Edom, they win. Okay, so we have to understand that this is how the system is rigged as of right now. Okay, so talks about cryptocurrency. Is cryptocurrency the future of money? Cryptocurrency has also been a recent addition and is testing waters of how we think about currency. Creating a currency that is traded and stored electronically with no central bank or government, the volatility and chaos of cryptocurrency markets show that without a commodity or trust, a currency struggles to become accepted, but it has still challenges the idea of currency and whether a monetary system needs to be controlled or not. So you know how I felt about cryptocurrency, about ultimately all systems lead to the CBDC. That's all I got to say on that one. Okay, you can just go ahead and skip this. Let's go ahead and go into the currency versus money conclusion. So it says, while many economists and anthropologists will argue about the true nature of money, it can be summarized that money is simply a form of payment for goods or services. Anything can become money if it becomes standardized and people agree on it. Okay, so anything can become money if it becomes standardized and people agree on it. So, for example, if I got a pair of, Concord 11 Jordans, you can literally go out into any major city. You got them stocked. There's somebody that wears it. It's in their size. You got people out there, they'll trade you like their phone for it, right? Because it has a stored value to that person. That person, you got things that people own. They got watches. Like, for example, someone may have a Rolex watch. They can go get a whole vehicle. They can go and make an agreement and say, hey, I will trade you your vehicle for this. And someone will take it. One of the examples I got was from a guy that was a Navy SEAL. As a Navy SEAL, he would talk about how he had to do solo missions. I believe he was a Navy SEAL and did some federal government work. And he had to do solo missions in different countries by himself. And one of the things he said is that he keeps a Rolex watch with him because if he's ever in a very bad bind and he needs transportation to get out of a situation, meaning he needs a car to get out of a situation in a third world country or developing nation, that he can literally go up to somebody and literally give and basically barter his Rolex watch for their vehicle. That's one of the reasons why he wears it when he goes to these other countries. So that way he can use it as a potential bartering tool to get something as valuable as a vehicle to get out of a bad situation in that country, right? So that's what that means. Remember, money is a store of value. That is what they're basically implying, okay? Now it says here, paper, coins, and digital banking has become the currency we know today, but it's important to remember that this is just one form of money, and in the future we may use a different form of money entirely. Another difference between currency and money is that currency is a liability, meaning that it is owed by a central bank or government to whoever owns the currency. This is where essentially currency acts as an IOU for money. Okay? I owe you and you owe me. Okay? Money is an asset, which means it is a store of value which can be exchanged for other goods and services. Real estate is an asset. A car, although some view it as a liability because it can depreciate over time. However, there are cars that actually you have something called collector cars. I've owned a collector car years back that actually only got more valuable the longer that I owned it. So for me, it became a store of value. It became an asset to me. It became something that I can unload to get what? I can unload it and go get goods and services off of it. Okay? So that's how you have to understand the difference between currency and money. Okay? So we have to understand the system that we're in and the tools and the instruments that are being used against us. Now, I'm going to show you just different things briefly. This is from Wikipedia. You have the Federal Reserve Bank, okay? Federal Reserve Act of 1913, and these are the different regions or districts, okay, in which the Federal Reserve Bank has. And we know that the main headquarters is going to be in Washington, D.C., okay? And as you go on, it goes into the history. And one of the guys, Heresy Financial, who I've recommended in the past, Heresy Financial goes into this whole thing beautifully, okay? He has a video where he goes into it beautifully. If you go to his channel, again, Heresy Financial, basically, it's funny because I did the lesson on Heretic, right? Heresy Financial, he goes into things that are not allowed to really be talked about concerning money. So if you watch like CNBC and they're talking about money, they're talking about the economy, they're talking about interest rates, they talk about a lot of different things. They don't go deep into it because their thing is to keep the masses fooled. He goes into certain things that you need to know if you want to understand what's going on. So it goes into the history of the Federal Reserve Bank. However, you can read it yourself. But let's let it be known one thing and one thing for certain, right? The Federal Reserve Bank is privately owned, okay? It is a private entity, okay? It's very deceptive. Now, this is what we're talking about, notes, okay? Remember, currency, notes, coins, meaning paper notes, coins, or digital, right? As we know today, there's something digital going on. So again, Federal Reserve note, also United States bank notes are the currently issued banknotes of the United States dollar. The United States Bureau of Engraving and Printing produces the notes, which is the paper money you see here, under the authority of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and issues them to the Federal Reserve banks at the discretion of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. That's the reason why I showed you the different locations, okay, that the different districts. It says here the reserve banks then circulate the notes to their member banks, at which point they become liabilities of the reserve banks and obligations of the United States. Federal Reserve notes are legal tender with the words, "This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private," printed on each note. The notes are backed by financial assets that the Federal Reserve banks pledge as collateral, which are mainly treasury securities, okay, and mortgage agency securities that they purchase on the open market by fiat payment. Now, this is where if you watch George Gammon or any of these financial guys, they'll talk about treasury. They'll talk about mortgage-backed securities, okay? That's what this is talking about when they say that. So it's very important when you hear them saying this, you understand what it is, okay? Then it goes into the history. I'm not going to read it. Again, these are just things that you can go back and look up, and you can see the history of these notes. I mean, I've seen some of these growing up. If you're from the 70s, 80s, okay, even 90s, you might have seen them, but I've had uncles that had these bills, okay, $500, $1,000. They stopped being circulated, I believe, in 1969. These two, the $5,000 and the $10,000, they stopped being circulated, I believe, in the 1930s or so, okay? But you could see them as well. Also, there were still, for a while, still making $2 bills as well that were also in circulation, but they stopped making those some years back, if I'm not mistaken. But there was a certain point you could still request and go to the bank and get brand new, fresh $2 bills. Okay. And it goes into years in circulation. Let me see here about how long they last in circulation after 2018. And this is eventually just going to go out of circulation. They're just going to make it to where it's just not, they're just not going to have paper money. Coins too. I mean, that's coins out the gate, done. Okay. Let me see here. If there's anything in here that's of need, not really. So now we know what that is after reading the other article as well. And then here, 6 uncommon U.S. currencies and denominations. So basically all the different bills. Okay, the $2 bill, the $500 bill, the $1,000 bill, the $5,000, the $10,000, the $100,000 bill, which is crazy, right? But these ended during the Great Depression. They stopped making these bigger bills because they were worried about money laundering and illegal activity going on with those bills. Remember, there was a Great Depression that went on. And like I said, if you look at what he said in the article about how eventually these things fail, right? That's the reason why if you look at it, 1913, it was by design after the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, the Federal Reserve banks were set up for them to eventually crash the economy like 16 years later. Like literally went to its first cycle of going up. You had the World War, remember you had World War I, and then you had the economic boom, which was known as the Roaring 20s. And then at the end of the 20s, 1929, you had the stock market crash, which was by design to allow the elites to take a wealth transfer from the masses. Okay? So very heavy stuff when you look at it. I mean, if you look at the system, it's so evil, so wicked. It's just crazy. Like I said, the video at the end that I'll post in the end is an edited version of a longer video, which I will put in the description box so you can watch the full interview in its totality. However, these were the main sound bites that, really are going to make you have a very different mindset about what we're in and how evil this system is. Now, as we go on, I'm going to just show y'all a few things. You got here, United States Department of Treasury. Okay, so the United States Department of Treasury is separate from the Federal Reserve Bank. Remember that their departments oversee the printing of money, their notes, okay, and the coins, okay? So you have to understand that. And here's the Treasury building. Can you see here, Secretary of Treasury is Janet Yellen. So now we're going to go into something as well. Let me show you this. You have the United States Treasury Securities. Remember the Treasury Securities that the Federal Reserve Bank deals with. They deal with what? Treasury securities and mortgage-backed securities. Now, these are the different Treasury securities that they have here. Treasury bonds, Treasury notes, Treasury bills. Now, one of the big things that's so heavy is what is known as the Treasury bonds. Okay? So the Treasury bonds, very, very big deal as well. In fact, this is an example in 1979 of a Treasury bond of $10,000 that gave back 10% value up until 1994, from 1979, and it was due 1994. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you something, because remember how I told you that you have stocks and bonds, which the origin of the stock and bond market goes back to the enslavement and the oppression of the children of Israel. This is a very, very heavy thing, right? Now, let me show you this. This is also a bond issued by the United Kingdom. So the U.S. has a treasury, the U.K. had a treasury. In fact, they had bonds, all these countries, these major countries that were ruled the world, came and took over the Western world. They had these things. Now, the British version is known as the Gilted Edge Security, or the Gilts, okay, for short. So that's what they do. If you look into it, when you buy a treasury bond, you are investing, you are putting money into the government, so that way that they can use that to finance their expenses. Now, I'm going to show you this, and it's going to be one of the last things I'm going to show y'all in regards to information. Like I said, y'all can go through and read it, but just know on a general basis what these things mean. So when you hear it in news, or you're watching something on YouTube, or you're reading an article, you can have a better idea of what it is. Now, the government bond. Now remember, the word bond is literally a shortened form of bondage, okay? A bondholder is a slaveholder, okay? This is a very heavy point. Now, it says a government bond or sovereign bond is a form of bond issued by the government to support public spending. It generally includes a commitment to pay period interest called coupon payments and to repay the face value of on the maturity date. Okay? So when you invest in a treasury bond, you are investing in slaves. I'm going to repeat that again, and you're going to hear it in the video, because that's what blew my mind when he said it. I watched a video where it was said some time ago by the same guy that's in the video. He said about how a treasury bond is a promise of future enslavement. This is very, very crazy. Okay? So essentially what happens is when you become a bondholder, you are you are basically investing in the government. You're telling the government, hey, listen, I'm going to give you this money because I believe that you're going to give me a return. And in turn, what the U.S. government will do is when you give them that money, they have to pay this back. Okay? They're obligated to pay this back, right? Because you're investing in them, and this is a bond agreement, okay? A contractual agreement. Now, what the United States government does is that they go out and they basically put more enslavement upon the masses, okay? And if they even got to go to war to make sure that they remain true to their bond agreement, they will do it. And that's essentially what you're seeing in today's time. That's what you've been seeing since they took over the earth, okay? Now let's go into an example of how this works. I'm not going to read this other stuff down here at the bottom. This example is very good for you to understand, and it should be very simple to understand as well. So this is going into a bond. For example, a United States Treasury bond. It says, for example, a bondholder invests $20,000. Okay, so you're basically telling the government, I'm going to give you $20,000 because I believe you're going to enslave enough people and make them work hard enough that you can pay this back to me in this way. That's essentially what you're saying. So it says called face value or principal into a 10-year government bond with a 10% annual coupon, which is what you'll be getting paid out. So the government would pay the bondholder a 10% interest, in this case $2,000 each year. So if this person goes and puts a $20,000 bondholder investment into the government through a treasury bond, every year they're going to get $2,000 for 10 years. Okay? It says each year and repay the $20,000, which is the principal. The original payment you gave them was $20,000. At the end of the 10 years, they're going to give you that original $20,000 back. Now, if you do the math, that person was able to double their money in 10 years. Okay? So they originally gave $20,000 and they got back a total of $40,000 because they got back the original principal, which is what their investment was, and they got back 10% each year, which is $2,000. $2,000 times 10 is $20,000. They were able to double their money in 10 years. This is one of the ways that a lot of people that are wealthy, they get very rich, because what they can do, this is a low risk, relatively high reward. Okay? Now there is a default risk if, the government fails, right? And this is a big deal, right? Because if that happens, that is a major collapse, okay, at that point. But this is one of the reasons why people don't invest in certain countries. They don't invest because there's a chance that they could default. The United States, because it's a reserve and because of it's the strongest economy, one can believe that if they invested in 2010, that, hey, in 10 years, I believe the United States government is still going to be strong enough and they're not going to default, that I'm still going to be able to get back my principal plus my payments, my interest payments each year. Okay, so that's just, food for thought for you as well. Now, we're going to go ahead and finish this off because this is sounding like a very wicked system. And like I said, watch the video at the end. We're going to go ahead and read this. This is Ecclesiasticus in the book of the King James Apocrypha, chapter 10 and verse 8. Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. So as you watch this video, bear this in mind. These two particular precepts. Remember that this is more of a lesson for you to understand the monetary system, the history of money, and the evil of devices that will be brought to naught by Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. So again, I want to give all glory and praises to our Heavenly Father Yahweh, and we do so in the name of our Lord and Savior Yahushai. Grace and mercy be bound to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Shalom.
You just come across the immorality of everything. We are totally enslaved by this monetary system, and there's this small group of people that get to ride for free in society. The elites and their buddies we've got this system that benefits the few at the expense of the many. And it is just so immoral to have the world population really enslaved just to do this wealth transfer to the few that get to run the game. But the difference between a system where you imagine dollars into existence to buy this house, the bank just imagines them, you're committing fraud, theft, you get enslaved for 15 years. When we used gold and silver are called honest money for a reason. If you want to buy a house, you have to work for a certain period of time to save up a certain amount of gold coins that you're going to buy that house with. The work that it took to do the prospecting, turn that find into a claim that is turned into a mine that mines the ore, and you got to move more than 30 tons of earth or ore to get 1 ounce of gold, 30 tons per ounce. And then make that into bars, melt the bars and mint them into coins. That amount of work equals the amount of work and effort that you had to put in to accumulate them, which equals the amount of work it takes to chop down all the trees, turn the trees into timber, dig up all the cement, dig up the copper ore and make copper and then pay people to build this house. And it's 3 transactions. Your transaction of doing the work in the middle, the transaction of all of these things that come together to actually make the gold coins, and the transaction of all the things that come together to make the house. They're equal values. It's a fair trade all the way across. With currency, it is fraud, theft, and enslavement. There is a big difference between money and currency, and everybody needs to start defining the difference. We need to start using proper terminologies here. I've been trying to do this since 2006. It's hard to call currency and money, but money must be a store of value, because that's what the dollar was a claim check. It was not money, and it said so right on the bill that it wasn't money. And in the beginning of my book, in the first chapter, there are some pictures of different notes that we used to have in circulation. And, the Treasury notes would say there have been deposited in the Treasury of the United States $10,000 in gold coin payable to the bearer upon demand. And then the Federal Reserve notes, and so it's a note. A note is, your IOU, right? And the Federal Reserve notes said that they were redeemable in gold on demand at the United States Treasury. So that's the Federal Reserve saying, well, here's my IOU, the neighbor will pay it.
Right.
and because the Treasury isn't part of the Federal Reserve, or in gold or lawful money at any Federal Reserve bank was the Federal Reserve note. So that's an admission that this note was not money. It was payable in gold or lawful money. What was the lawful money? That was the Treasury notes that were 100% gold backed. And so right on the bill, it said, this is not money. It's an IOU for money. And that's how this whole thing started, was with a gold standard. And these standards, they keep on, they cheat it, and then the cheating builds up energy and creates this emergency. There's something like the Great Depression, something along
or World War or something,
crisis that was caused by cheating. Now, if you use, it's immoral to use something that is empty and has no, loaning somebody nothing and then expecting to get paid back something is immoral.
right?
The U.S., when you look at what the digits in your bank account are, Bank of England says those digits are a reminder to the bank that the bank owes you IOUs. And that's exactly what they say. The bank owes you IOUs. What are the IOUs that it owes you? In the United States, it's Federal Reserve notes. And that's an IOU. So you dig down deeper to try and figure out what that IOU is. And on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, their liabilities are the IOUs that they've made that are in circulation in your wallet.
But it's an IOU nothing.
Well, no, it's an IOU YOU. That's the entire world monetary system is IOU, because what backs them is U.S. Treasuries. That's the fundamental asset of the Federal Reserve. And it's the same for the Bank of England. What backs their currency is British gilts, and gilt is a good name for it.
I never thought of that. That's
So, but if you went to the Federal Reserve if everybody closed their bank accounts, paid off their loans first, and then whatever's left, they get paid there at these IOUs that are Federal Reserve notes, and you showed up at the Federal Reserve and you said, I want you to make good on these notes, they would have to give you back U.S. Treasuries. And what is a treasury? It's loan me $1 trillion. This is the government now. Loan me $1 trillion. I promise you, over a 30-year period, I'm going to pay you that back. That trillion plus another trillion of interest. Where do they get that? By taxing you in the future. So what they owe you is a piece of your future lifetime. That's what backs the entire monetary system, is our enslavement, these pieces.
your future productivity.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, they owe you your future productivity.
Exactly, right. The hours that you have to work in the future to be able to pay the tax so that the Treasury can pay the principal and interest on these Treasury bills, bonds, and notes that the Treasury bought by imagining a number into existence and printing a note that says, I owe you, YOU. Yes, and I consider inflation and deflation a monetary phenomenon. It's the expansion or contraction of the currency supply. Prices are the symptom of the inflation or the expansion or contraction of the currency supply. And all of it causes theft and wealth transfers. But part 6 shows the wealth transfer and the enslavement that has gone on, and what this does when you steal from the poor and the middle class through currency creation, and you give to the richest people on the planet by inflating the stock. Whoever's wealth is determined by their stock portfolio. Those are the people that the wealth was taken from anybody that's working for a living and doesn't have 99% of their net worth tied up in stocks. And it's given to the people that do have 99% of their net worth in stocks. It's stolen purchasing power, and it's just a primary function of our immoral, evil monetary system. The world's monetary system is just flat out evil. When you really dig down and study this thing and get to the root of all of it, this is immoral. And I mean, I can't, I'd love to buy some treasury bonds right now, because it's probably, when they cut rates again in the next emergency, those bonds go way up in value and you can sell them at a huge profit. In the meantime, you're getting paid something. But you're investing in the slave trade. You are investing in the enslavement of ourselves and future generations when you invest in a U.S. Treasury.